Now we'll start with module development. Although we have already generated our module, well, the skeleton of the module with code generation commands previously, we haven't really done anything yet. So now we'll start with the basic, most important pieces of the Orchard API that you can use from something like a controller, an MVC controller. Because previously we have also seen a few pieces of the Orchard API, but just from templates in a theme. Now we'll go into the code behind. So here we have our solution still, and in there we have our module generated that we checked out previously. And what the code generation command also generates is a controller with a corresponding view. So we'll start with that. Nothing more special needed here. All right, so here we have our controller. Well, first of all, remember that we have used the localizer from a template in our theme. Let's also do the same thing, but from a controller. So again, when you display a string to a user, well, whether that's on the UI or whether you are sending it to some remote service or anything, so when you are creating strings, when you are creating text that will be read by an end user, then always use localized strings. Because even though you might not need localization right away, if you do need in the future, then it will be very useful to have all the strings as localized strings already. Whereas turning all the existing strings into localized strings is a really big pain. So even if you don't think you will need localization, I encourage you to use localized strings, and that's what we'll do. So in our controller, we will inject a localizer, and that will be actually a string localizer. And what I'm doing now is that I'm actually using our Visual Studio extension. So if you check it out on the Visual Studio Marketplace, there is our Orchard Visual Studio extension, which has a couple of very useful features. And one of them is the dependency injector. And the other one, or the other big feature, is the error log voucher, which I will show you a bit later. So now I will inject a dependency. I use the keyboard shortcut, but you can also use Tools, Inject Dependency. And I will inject a string localizer. And as you can see, this is pre-populated for us. Yeah, and let me import a namespace too. As you can see, IHtmlLocalizer is not an Orchard service. However, it's because it's an ASP.NET Core service. However, the actual implementation, so the actual localization infrastructure, as we have already discussed, is actually provided by Orchard. And nevertheless, still, I encourage you to use localized strings everywhere when it's about user-facing strings. So let's do another Hello World demo just for the sake of it. And well, I will just pass a localized string to the view from here. Well, we can do that via ViewData, nothing fancy, and let's call it something like message. And let's do the localization. Notice that the field is a capital T, which is quite unusual for a private field. The reason for this is simply convention. We have been doing this for a decade in Orchard, but this is not mandatory. Of course, you can name the field in any way you like. So let's use the same usual hello world message as we tend to do here. All right, and now that we have this here, we can now display the message in the view. So let's open up the view, and yeah, well, there was this content generated for us by the command, but let's display the message here too. All right, and that's it. So what we have done is that we have injected a string localizer and used a string localizer to create a localized string in the controller, which we passed to the view. So the next thing is to actually run this application, and let's see what happens. Do note that our module is not yet enabled, because we haven't enabled it from the Orchard admin yet. So the first thing we have to do is to actually go to the Orchard admin and do that. And for that, we'll need to log in. So as usual, we will use admin password 1, exclamation mark. And our module will be available from the admin here, from under features. But do note that this is possible because it was properly added to the web project as well. So let me enable it. But in the meantime, do know that the web project has a dependency on our module here. So this was also added by the code generation command, but if you add a new module, the new project, a new C# project here that you want to use as a module, don't forget to add it as a reference to the web project too. All right, and how we can access this index action here is, well, the usual route patterns. So Dojo Course.module, then /home, and then /index. And, well, here it is. Well, we have a few other things, a few other messages coming from the theme development sessions, but otherwise we have our string here. So that's pretty good. Now, this was using the string localizer, but there is actually also an IHtmlLocalizer. Now, an IHtmlLocalizer is the basic difference between string localizer and IHtmlLocalizer is that in an IHtmlLocalizer, the localized string can also contain HTML. Otherwise, it's exactly the same thing. The distinction is due to security reasons. So it's better to prevent displaying plain raw HTML if you are not sure that that's indeed what you want to do, to prevent cross-site request forgery attacks. So we can also use that, but we also need some reason to use that because, well, here is no reason for that. And our reason will be another Orchard service, the Notifier. So let me first inject a notifier, which is an INotifier. Oops. And notice that, again, we have code completion here in the inject dependency dialog. Now, the notifier is a very simple, very useful service, and we have already seen it many times, but just from the UI. When you do something on the admin UI and you see those green or yellow or sometimes red messages, that's the notifier. In a previous session, we have used the notifier from workflows too, but now we'll use it from code. So if you have injected a notifier, now let's display a notification here from the index method. So we'll need to use the notifier, and as we see, we have extension methods for the types of notifications here, like error, information, success, and warning. Let's use success here because, well, this is neither a warning, neither an error. It's not really an information message because greeting the world is, well, a great success. So let's do that. Now, the issue is that, as you can see, it's not just a simple message, a simple string. I get an error here, but rather we have to use a localized string, or specifically a localized HTML string. And that's where the IHtmlLocalizer comes into play. So we'll also need to inject an IHtmlLocalizer. And again, we get code generation here. And the IHtmlLocalizer is commonly put into a field called H. But again, this is simply a convention. If you like it, you can. If you like it, you can use it. Otherwise, no need to do it. I just formatted the constructor a bit because the line started to get a bit long. And now that we have the IHtmlLocalizer, we can pass the localized HTML string to the notifier. Do note that the string localizer as well as the IHtmlLocalizer are injected with this generic form, where they need to contain the type that they are injected into. This is because these localizers need a context. So when they load the localized strings, they need to know where they are actually loaded from. And so these localized strings can be distinguished between. However, although you need to inject such an object, the fields can be simpler. The fields can be just simply IStringLocalizer or IHtmlLocalizer. That doesn't matter. So now we have our IHtmlLocalizer here. So yeah, it's not _HTMLLocalizer, but H, and it's used in exactly the same way as the string localizer, simply with H. So let me save this and let me reload the site. And actually, let me also go to the admin and change the theme to something different, so we can actually see a bit nicer styling here. So let's go to admin. And in the meantime, well, we also got the notification here. Well, there's a bunch of hello worlds now, but this is the one coming from the notification. So let me just switch back the theme to the block theme. All right, and let's see what happens now. Now we have, well, a much nicer hello world here. All right. These were some very basic user-facing services. So services that you would use when you are building some kind of UI or user-facing feature. There is one very useful service that is quite important here as well, and which will be the last basic example on how to use injected services in Orchard, and that will be a logger. Now, of course, a logger is a service that you use to log messages to some kind of log. So that in its basic form is pretty much a text file where you can save messages. And you are saving technical messages about the state of the application here. Commonly, if there is an error in the application, you'd at least log it. Otherwise, you would log other debug data, informational data about the state of the application that you might need to access when you are troubleshooting something, or when you just want to know what the application is actually doing. Similarly, you would commonly log security issues, like when a user tried to log in, but the login failed because of an incorrect password. You know that. And of course, logging is a broad topic, and and not just related to Orchard, so we won't go into details, but let's just try to use a logger now. And what I will do is that I will inject a logger, which is again an interface-based injected service, and again we will need to inject a version that has the current class as a type parameter. All right, and now we can log something here, and with the logger, similarly, how the debugger, the notifier works, we have different levels of messages. But this is actually in the log information would be, I think the second stage. Debug would be the first. I mean the most basic. Then warning, and then error, and that's it. There is no fatal here. I will use a log error here because depending on the configuration of the logger, not every message is actually saved into the log file. Here in the web project, we have this nlog config. Orchard out of the box uses the logging engine nlog, the logging library nlog, and this nlog.config is, well, a configuration file for nlog. And this was also generated by the code generation commands for us. And as you can see, we have not just the we have configured it here what the format of log messages are, and also which is the minimum level that is actually logged, and that is warning. So if you log an error or a warning currently, that will be actually saved into the log file. If you log a debug or information message, that won't be saved to the log file. The reason for this is because we don't want noise. We don't want huge log files with information that we don't actually need. So the common practice is that we use this default configuration, and if we are troubleshooting something specifically, then we change the min level here to even to debug. But otherwise, use the logging methods here appropriately. So if there is some huge issue, log an error. If there is an issue that lets the application continue more or less normally, but you think that you want to know about, then use a warning. If there is something that really just for information, the application is operating normally, but you might want to log something to see what's happening in the application when there is, for example, some background processing what the status is, then use information. And finally, if you want to log some very detailed information that you only need when you are troubleshooting, use debug. But here I will use just error. And we could again use hello world, or we can use hello log this time, just to have a little bit of change. And now let me refresh the page. And of course, now the application is recompiling, and once that's done and it has restarted, a message will be logged. And there is another feature from our Visual Studio extension that I wanted to show you, and that is the Log Voucher. This icon here, you see, it's now bright red. Previously, you probably didn't even notice it because, well, that's the point. You don't need to notice it unless there is something in the error log. This is useful for development, because while you are working on an app but you don't have the debugger attached all the time, this can help you notice if something goes wrong. So if you click it, it will actually open the log, And here it is. Our log message, hello log here. We see that the level of the log message was error. We also see that it's coming from home controller. So this is why we need to inject a generic ILogger with the current class as the type parameter, because that's how it will know where it is. And we have some further contextual information here. Of course, a timestamp, the name of the tenant. Again, we just have a default tenant by default, even if you are not utilizing multi-tenancy specifically, but we have actually created a tenant here. And there is also some correlation ID. And of course, you can change the whole thing from nlog.config. So if you want to change the format of the message, or what exactly is logged, or where logging happens to, because it can be a file, it can be some remote log server, it can be the console, anything, then you can change it here. And that's about the basic Orchard services and the basics of using the Orchard API via injected dependencies.